started. Okay. I also make a suggestion that you make sure that you are on speaker view and not gallery view, because the speaker view will show you the painting up close. And I think we just got one more person on. Adrienne. Welcome, Adrienne. I'm just going to copy the information in the chat one more time. All right, so we are going to get started. This is a very small painting, but we're going to get started with the drawing. And hello, Adrienne. Good to see you. Great to see you.
How was Italy?
It was amazing. Thank you. Good. I'll send you some pictures.
All right.
Through email. Okay. I'm just going to mute some people because I hear some background. Okay. We're going to get started with the drawing portion. So basically, what we do is we're going to draw the lantern, and then around it, we pretty much do use the paint. I did not draw each of the leaves, but if you want to, I will show you, to add some leaves in by drawing. But I actually really just free-handed this, the background, obviously not the lantern. So let's get started. And I apologize. I forgot to say my name is Anita Thompson for those that are new. I know there are some new faces here. I'm Anita Thompson. I own Art Venture Workshops. I'm a mobile-based art business that mostly teaches for libraries, but I do some other events as well in other places. But libraries are mainly what I do, and I love it. I have a newsletter you can join if you're interested in this kind of thing, and I will give out my email at the end of this program. So we're going to start drawing the lantern here. And so we're going to go on the right-hand side of our small canvas. And as you can see, the canvas is 5 by 7, and I have it as 7 inches down and 5 inches across. So be sure to hold your canvas that way as well. And so we're going to start sketching from the right side of our canvas. So it's going to kind of come in off of the right side, and you see the curve. Part. And so we have the pole. I'll make this a little darker so you can see it on Zoom. And that goes right along the edge on the right side. I always also like to mention that as you're sketching along with me, if you want to add some other things, you are welcome to do that because this is your painting. So for instance, if you want to add some different details, I had somebody last month add a moon to theirs on the left top corner, which I thought was really neat. So just a suggestion. Okay, so once we have the longer part of our lantern, we're going to start with some basic shapes. The first being this shape right here as we start to create the top portion. So we have a smaller shape on top of the larger shape here. You also want to make sure not to go too big, so that you're ensuring that your lantern is going to fit on this whole side of your canvas. And so from this one shape here, we're then going to split that shape with a curved line here, and then one more toward the bottom. And we're going to keep going. We have now another smaller shape as our lantern is starting to look more realistic. Here again, you know, if you would like to add, you know, some different things to it as well, maybe you don't want yours to be as fancy, or maybe you want it a little more fancy. You could add some curved edges. What else could you add? I'm trying to think what some people did differently in the class I taught in person. They didn't really do much difference with the lantern. It was more the background. Okay, so we have some straightish lines happening right before we have the actual light to the lantern. That shape is going to be curved, and the two lines on the side are not as straight as you think. They are more going sort of outward, in an outward direction. So this one and this one. And we make it three-dimensional from the bottom. So we break it down into some very basic shapes. You know, as I was driving today and looking at the fall foliage, I realized how beautiful it looks out there right now. I guess because we missed the beginning part of October, but I did read that that our fall happens toward the end of October, whereas Vermont and states like that are already in full bloom, if you will. And I felt like today it's really starting to pop. Okay, and then here at the bottom, we have the bottom part, sort of the last part of the lantern. And here again is where, if you wanted to, you could do something different. Then we're going to come back to the middle part of the lantern and draw two lines. And we have our candle in between. Oh, let's see, Sydney. Okay, we've got somebody coming on. Hi, Sydney. I'm going to copy the information in the chat for you. We've started our drawing, but welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so the last few details to this are going to be up in this area right here. So we just make two curved lines so that it now looks three-dimensional in that section. And we do the same on the smaller part above it. I'm going to make this darker so you can see it. Okay. Now, I mentioned that for the background, I painted in my leaves. So basically, what I did was I took my flat brush and I basically made shapes. But if you are more interested in having something a little more concrete, this is where you would start to kind of create some leaf shapes. So that might look something like this, at least for some of the leaves that are not bunched together. So this kind of gives you a bit of an idea of where to place those leaves. Um, you want to get the impression that the leaves are um, kind of going over the long part of the lantern as well, the pole. It's at night, so we're going to paint the background black first and then paint our leaves on top. So our first portion is going to be painting the background black. And I like to use my flat brush for that. And then also alternating with the detail brush, for instance, to trace around the lantern. So let's get started with that. So I'm going to grab my detail brush first. And I'm going to start painting black along the edge of the lantern. And then filling in the background. And just take your time going around the details. You're probably thinking our lantern almost looks black, and there are portions of it that are. So in those areas, we really have black and then also more of like a charcoal gray, a really dark gray. So it's kind of a combination. Um, the black you can see, and also turquoise. We use turquoise in it as well. But the black you can see on the darker areas of the lantern. So here again, I'm just kind of going around some of the leaves that I drew. I will be adding more, but I liked where some of these are pre-positioned. So I'll just go around them. As I mentioned, if you want to draw like a small moon in the top left corner, feel free to do so. Thought that was a really neat idea. Just take your time and relax as you're just painting the black so far. I was also just reading that, remember those coloring books, those adult coloring books that were in quite a few years ago? They're back. I saw them in Barnes and Noble, and I think I saw them on Amazon too. And you can get all sorts of different ones. Like right now, you can get Halloween ones. So I bought one. They've got some kind of cute drawings, and then some that are really detailed of like one of them's like a haunted house. I'll have to find it. Um, that was really interesting. I love Halloween, so I thought this might be something fun just to color at the end of the night. Trying to stay off my phone as much as possible. I've been limiting myself as much as I can when, it's hard when you use your phone for business. I think everybody does these days. But, I think I have a tendency sometimes to just go on my phone right before bed instead of reading. So I'm trying to get back into reading.
Ooh.
Much healthier. All right, so I'm going to start adding the black here into the background. And so basically, we add black around the top, and then as it gets down towards the lantern, like sort of around the lantern, you're going to mix some turquoise with the black. So I'm going to kind of show you what that color is going to look like. I'm going to mix that on my plate here, because it's also going to be a very similar color that we're going to use for the actual lantern. Although we'll be using our blue instead of our turquoise, so it'll be a little bit darker. So you can see it's a grayish blue, kind of like a slate color. And so need to get it just a little bit lighter. It's not too much of a difference, but just going to lighten up around the left and the right side where the light is going to be shining outside of the lantern. And you can even add some turquoise splashes into that color as well. This painting is a much looser painting, so it's okay to have sort of an impressionistic background, if you will. The rest is mostly black. But here again, you can also change a little bit of the color if you like before adding all the leaves. We do want to make sure the black is in the background is dry before we add our leaves. All right, almost getting there. So this is where, how I mentioned, you can add some of the turquoise in with the black, and you're going to get a little bit of a gray. Here towards the bottom portion and kind of around the sides of your lantern. Make sure you cover the whole background. Obviously making sure that you don't paint over the pole portion of the lantern. Okay. We're going to want to let the background dry. So if you need to take a little break, if you want to get a snack, refresh your water. I might refresh mine. It always gets so kind of inky from using the black. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get some fresh water. I'm going to bounce my painting up and down a little bit just to let it dry. It doesn't have to be completely dry for us to do the next step because we're not painting the leaves on yet. We're going to be focusing on the lantern, but I like to dry it a little bit before we get started. The other thing you can start doing is we're going to create the color for the lantern. So the base color is that charcoal gray. And so you can either use the turquoise and black, just like we were doing for the background at the bottom, or you can use your blue and black. I tend to do a combination of both. Our blue, the regular blue, I use for a little bit of some color on the lantern afterward. So I'm going to mix up that color. And I add a little bit of white to it. So it's basically black, the turquoise, and a little bit of white so that it gets lighter. So that color is approximately looking like this. So it's a gray, but I add some turquoise in to give it again a little bit more of like a slate color. That one's right there. And we're going to start off with painting the pole. And so you want to take your time because this is a much smaller painting. You can either use your flat brush or your round brush, depending on what you feel more comfortable with. I like to use my flat brush. I'm able to turn it and it makes nice straight lines for me. But if you're more comfortable with something that is smaller, with a brush that is actually smaller, you might want to entertain your round brush or flop in between the two of them, depending. But just take your time. As we create the base color on the pole. And once we get the base color on the pole, we can start to create the gray, make it go down into the rest of the lantern. And then what we do is we use black as the separation between those parts. So I like to start off with the first part and paint it the gray. And while the paint is still wet, go into the pole using my round brush, and I'm going to paint the turquoise as the top part as it's getting a little bit lighter. And then we wait for that to dry and we'll add more of a highlight with the white. So again, as we're separating the lines, the next portion, I use a thin strip of the black. I'm going to go a little bit closer now that we've drawn it already. So basically, if you look at the finished one up close, there is black in between each of the sections. And so when we paint the gray, you can then go right in afterward and paint the black in, as I did with this first part. And I'm going to do it now over here. in here. So I paint sections with the gray, and our highlight is going to be mostly on the right side of the lantern. So you can see that I've added some white to the bigger section here. And you want to do that while the paint is wet. You can pre-mix it using gray and then mixing it with white before you apply it to the painting. Again, just taking your time here. So I'm now mixing up some incredibly light gray. This is for the highlight on the right side. And then later on, I'll add some white. See, I'm adding that right now as the paint is white or wet. Sorry. And we're working our way down. You know, again, you go into the next section and paint it gray. In between, after you do that, you're going to use your black to create the line that separates those two sections. So I keep my flat brush loaded with the gray. And then my round brush, I have black mostly on that one. Somebody in the class that I taught this in person mentioned they thought this would also look pretty neat as a snow painting, like adding snow instead of leaves. So I might do that, but not today. All right, so here again, in the next section here, I'm going to add a little bit lighter to the right side. Again, by using an incredibly light gray by mixing the white. Adding that to the right side. Because this is a tiny painting, you don't need to use a whole lot of paint, especially in the sections that we're doing now. All right, so now the gray. Moving into a very small section. Now I will be going back and adding more, adding some turquoise later on to the base color. But now going back and using black again. as the separating color for each section because it would be dark. And taking your time. If you have trouble using your round brush and getting a nice fine line when you're trying to create the smaller lines, you can add a little bit of water to kind of make it inky, and then just a little bit, and then you can roll your brush through the paint and toward yourself. So as you are pulling on the brush, you roll it so that it makes a point, and see if that helps. And then sometimes I go right ahead and, especially as we're getting toward the larger part here, I go ahead and I pre-draw the black lines and sort of paint in between, but you can still go back and make the lines a little darker later on if you need to. Okay, so now in each of the sections, you get your gray again. Feel like concentrating for this painting is very pertinent as we're working with smaller sections. I'm always amazed at those. You ever seen those landscapes that are that some artists do that are incredibly tiny, and the details are incredible. And I've seen them the way they're like 5 by 7 like this. I don't know that I would be able to sustain my patience for that long. But boy, are they beautiful. To be able to get that much detail in that small space is quite a skill. Okay, so you can keep going ahead and again, at this point, sort of redrawing or pre-drawing, I should say, pre-drawing the black lines in between before you paint the gray. And then going back later on and making them darker if you've painted over them too much. You'll reach a point where You probably only want to use your round brush in the lantern, but it's up to you. I tend to switch to my round brush as it's getting more towards the open part where the light is. And the thinner parts. Gotta mix up a little more gray here. Okay. Slowly getting it filled in. Okay, so as we are getting towards the bottom portion of the lantern, we have black happening on the sections on either side of the candle. And then we also have black happening in the details on the bottom portion here, but we have to lighten up our background first. And I do that with adding some of that turquoise and a bit of the gray. So it's almost like the opposite color or the color we were using. And also adding green. Adding sort of a light green with mixing the yellow. And a little bit of turquoise. So we kind of want that sort of that image of that there are leaves all around, some that are out of focus, and that is sort of our greenish color. And once you have the lantern painted your base of the gray, this is where, again, you're going to go back and add the black in between the sections. And then we're going to start adding turquoise and a little more white to make it lighter. So if you haven't added black to your sections, you want to start doing that. So that they are clearly defined. You know, and that's before moving into the complete bottom portion where the light is, which the light is a combination of red, orange, and then obviously yellow for the candlelight area. But we're not quite there yet. Going to add some lightened spots again to the lantern up here on the right by coming back and using the round brush and adding some lighter areas using a white and gray. And then also you can use that in the, oh, yeah, I agree, Beth. People paint the miniature masterpieces. I know. I I think they're delightful, but I don't know that I don't think I could do them. But I've seen some of the landscapes are just beautiful. But I don't have the patience. All right, so here I am going back and adding some brightness to the top of the pole using a little bit of white and gray and a little bit of white. I have just a little bit on my round brush. And then also in that pole, I've added some turquoise. So I'm going to dry off my round brush and add some turquoise next to the white. Oops. And the turquoise I tend to add pretty thickly. Same thing, starting to add it into the sections that are already painted and the paint is dry so that the turquoise sort of sits on top, gives it a metallic sort of look. And then painting in each of the three sections that are underneath the first part of the lantern. This part here. You can see I'm sort of outlining, but going on the inside of each section with the turquoise. You know, and then later on, going back and adding a little more black to the outside as we start to paint the background, different colors, dependent on your leaf colors. Okay. As we're working towards the lights, this is where I like to add a yellow glow around the candle first, since it's one of the lighter colors. And then I gradually build up the color around it using kind of splotches of orange in between, making sure that you're leaving space for the two black, um, sections that are still the lantern. So I'm adding splotches of orange mixed with red. In the lantern here. Also adding, again, a little bit of some greenish yellow. Green and yellow mixed together. To make a little bit of a lighter green. I added a little bit of black to it so that I got a little bit of an olive green too. Basically just trying to recreate a background of somewhat colorful leaves in that area. And the candle itself is a combination of red and black to make more of a darker red. And I pre-mix that on my plate. So again, red and black to make more of a darker red, which I'll do right now. So more like a burgundy. Of which on one side, I lighten it up a little bit by just adding some white to the candle. Here again, just taking your time as our painting space is smaller. And when you're ready, you can let that dry a little bit. Or you can start painting the black on either side. The candle I use white with a little bit of yellow for the actual flame. But if you like, you can add some red to that too. And orange. It's very tiny. I actually left the first one blank, kind of like just with white. But this one I've added a little bit of reddish orange and then just a tiny bit of white inside the flame. Right there. Really tiny kind of splash of white. It's starting to paint the black in. Also going over some of the previous sections. Where the black got a bit muted. You definitely need a very thin brush. Thin round brush for these parts. And then as you're working down, you're also going to fill those in with black, but the background underneath, I do more of a green. I think one of the most fun parts of this one is starting to add in leaves. Uh, Now just going back again and just making a few more thicker lines with the black in the creases. Right, adding a little bit of greenish yellow again to the bottom in this section here. And a little bit up above, adding a little more orange and green in the inside. Kind of want to make it a little bit muted. And going back with some more black along the edge of where the bottom portion of the lantern is. You can add a little bit of a grayish black on the outside. And even a little bit of turquoise. So that it stands out against the black background. And when you're ready, you're going to start adding first some green to the background and then adding the colorful leaves. So when I'm talking about a green, I like to mute the green again with yellow and then adding a bit of black to make it a little bit dull. And tiny bit of turquoise. So I'm going to show you what that color looks like. So that is the yellow, green, bit of turquoise, and a slight touch of black to make it just a little bit darker. And that's going to give the color that you see here. And I'm making leaves just by using the side of my brush. This is my flat brush. And adding kind of green areas like foliage, painted sections, but still letting the black of the night show through. But I use the green as a little bit more of a background, very subtle, so that it looks like that, you know, there's the black of the night is still happening, but you can see a little bit of this, you know, the green leaves kind of coming through. And then we start adding the colors. Orange, red and burgundy, which again, we use, you can use red and black. You know, anything that you want to add for your leaves. any colors. You know, you can do reddish orange, which I think I'm going to do right now too. So I'm mixing up some colors here. Here's red and orange. And I'm making the shape almost like an eyeball shape. Like I start off the first part and then I go like that. But they're leaves, not eyeballs. You know, and you can make some kind of look like they're fading a little bit into the night. I also use turquoise and blue for the leaves. And let's not forget yellow. Just a little bit of yellow in this one. Sometimes I go right on top of the same leaf and add a little more color in. As if the leaf is changing, kind of, you know, in the middle of changing. And against the black background, it really looks nice. All right, now adding a bit of the turquoise. I've kept the orange on my brush and I'm adding a little of the turquoise and it's giving it a little bit of a muted color, which is nice. So think of this as, you know, leaves are falling. There's foliage in the background. And I'm going to add some green. You know, this is where you can really have fun. yellow. And then any finishing touches you want to do, you can add a little more light using, whitish gray to your lantern if you feel like it needs to be a little brighter. Going in now, just adding a few of those lighter spots. And I'm going to go back and just add a little more um, black to some sections. Can't wait to see what these look like. I think they're all going to be so different because, this is such a kind of a more free painting. And so you can, define edges on your lantern, going back and adding a little more black around sections. Make it pop out a little more. Or you can lighten it up as well. A little more yellow to the glow. Dare say I actually like this painting a little better than my original. Adding a little more glow. All right. So I'm wondering what everybody else's looks like. I'm going to stop the recording first.